Welcome to the Inspired Focus podcast. You are in for a treat today with this episode with Keri Ford. She is incredible when it comes to helping women overcome anxiety, especially when they are leaders in business. It is such a huge problem that I experienced myself, and I actually had the joy of getting coached by Keri in the last year, and that is why I brought her onto this episode. We talk about some incredible pieces of information that are going to help you deal with some of the toughest moments in business. I cannot wait for you guys to listen to this episode and get everything that Keri has to share. It's going to be amazing. Here's your episode. Welcome back to the Inspired Focus podcast, and I am so excited for our guest today. I was fortunate enough to be a client and in a coaching program with our guest today, and it was an incredible experience that had really pushed me to step into the place I am today. And I'm so grateful that we have become friends and colleagues, and I'm sure we're going to get to work together again in the future. I'm excited to welcome Keri Ford and her brilliance when it comes to somatic success and truly regulating your nervous system as an entrepreneur and everything that you go through with this journey in entrepreneurship and stepping into your greatness, stepping into who you can be and allowing yourself to truly get away from all of the things we've been taught our whole life and explore new ways of being so we can be in our greatest self and make the biggest impact on the world. So welcome, Keri. Thank you so much for joining me and being one of my early guests. I couldn't think of anyone better to be here and have an amazing conversation with. So tell me, what is going on now? What's going on in your world today? You have, even in the time since we stopped working together just a few months ago, like massive, incredible changes that you have embodied and are sharing with the world.
Thank you for seeing me in that. And I feel so grateful to be here. So thanks for having me. Yeah, a lot has happened.
Yeah.
Holy shit, right? Like the unbecoming never really ends. Sometimes I find myself getting angry at what I feel like I am required to give up when the things I'm required to give up is actually nothing in truth, right? Because it's not really us, but it's what our identity wants to cling on to and thinks defines us. So I have been in a deconstruction phase of life. And you've seen that reflected in my business and the way I serve women in leadership. So that hasn't changed. Like I still serve women, even when I get those rando guys that are like, "Do you coach guys?" I'm like, "No, I got a guy for you. He's my boyfriend. Go work with him." But I still work with women. I still work with women in leadership, but the lens is slightly different. I realized the one thing that I actually have been working with women on this entire time, whether it was through intuitive eating, making friends with their body, or through, the sanctuary retreats and really just more empowerment in their life purpose, was overcoming anxiety. So that was a really interesting place to land. And I will tell you, there was all sorts of mind drama around that being the thing I do.
Amazing.
But I'm excited. Yeah.
I just have to say, like, I have loved watching this. I loved working with you. And as a coach, I admired it because it's a lot of what I aspire to be and what I think we coach in a very similar, deeply intuitive way. And I love that about you because it's not somebody else's framework that was given to you and you just like replicate out in the world, which I think is one of the big problems in the coaching
So many people.
today.
Yeah, so many people.
It's such a huge problem that really doesn't truly help people get to the deeper layers, get to the things that are actually at the core of what's holding them back. And what I think is so beautiful about what you've discovered, even just in the last few months, of this golden thread that has been through your coaching journey of changing already so many people's lives, is you're getting to a really core piece of what is actually happening, whether it's in the weight loss journey or it's in the entrepreneurial journey and getting to, your $1 million mark, or stepping into your greatest self, that there's this through line that you found that you're really making a difference for.
Hugely. And I think that it's interesting too, as my avatar shifted, like the women that I'm so blessed to work with, like how, who I was speaking to even shifted, and how so many of them, it didn't matter if they were a celebrity or they managed a multi-million-dollar company or they were a self-made millionaire, all the things that we put people on pedestals for, you realize at the end of the day, like, they're humans too. They also have fears, and we're all really working through the same shit. And overcoming anxiety has been a huge through line that I've seen with all of these women, because I used to think, I actually said this on my podcast yesterday because I was actually just filming my first episode of that, but I was saying that I confused anxiety for motivation. That, like,
yes,
butterflies, can't sit still, always have the list going, but it was motivation through fear. The inability to sit still, the inability to just be enough. I never felt like enough. And so it was like, what's the next thing? Even when I achieved the goal I had been chasing that entire time, I was always on to the next thing. And I realized so many women, I mean, even at the level that we perceive, like, oh, they must have their shit figured out. Oh, they must not deal with this anymore because they're famous, because they have all this money, because they do all these things. And we see the outward success, and you realize that they're struggling with the same thing too. And so the part I get really excited to work with women on is, how can we redefine what success feels like, not just what it looks like?
Mm-hmm.
And that's an inner body, nervous system experience.
I love that so much. And it was so much of my experience, the journey that I had been on before even coming to meet you. And you helped me dive deeper into that, getting to a place of feeling deeply safe in my own body.
Mm-hmm.
And recognizing that the lack of safety that I had experienced before was such a huge driving force for my success in entrepreneurship. And I had such a huge fear, and I'd love to hear what your thoughts are on this, of like, well, if I fix this and this goes away, then who am I?
This was a really interesting place for me to arrive in what I talked about before, this unbecoming. So I gave up makeup for 30 days. And to some people, that might not be a big deal. But to me, it felt like I was giving up something real.
Yeah.
And that was the problem. I actually felt like a part of me was dying. And the part of me that was dying was the default mask that I had been so used to putting on and posturing. It was the thing, in fact, that thought success needed to look a certain way, but it only perpetuates further separation within self and with other women. So the question I started to ask myself is, who do I get to be for women, with women? They don't need another woman in a pencil skirt standing up in front of the room preaching at them. They need someone to sit on the floor without makeup and say, I fucking see you.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And I'm here with you in what is. And so that requires me to just be me without the need to posture. Like, fuck what success is supposed to look like. That's not what women need. They already come into containers with the idea that they don't belong there, because they already put everybody else on a pedestal. They already feel like they don't belong. They feel like they're behind. They already feel like they're not enough. So that was the question that led me to giving that up. And I arrived at this place where I suddenly found stillness in my mind, as if it was a walking meditation. And I arrived where I was like, it's so quiet here. This is weird. This is a weird place to be. Why is it so quiet? And suddenly, in the beingness, there's nothing else required. I didn't have to get ready to go somewhere. I was like, wow, I just like leave the house with no makeup. It was such an interesting experience. I went on a girls trip to Vegas, no makeup. It was so interesting.
I have loved watching this journey for you.
because
Mm.
when I entered into your world, we are very different humans in that way. Like I kind of
Yeah.
live in that capacity, and that's almost an identity for me. So it's been kind of an interesting thing for me to watch you go through that on the other side and me be like, oh, maybe also it's a mask on the other side too, of like, I
Could
am
be.
this like grounded hippie mountain girl who doesn't wear makeup or heels, right? It's like such an interesting
Interesting.
thing, right? I mean, it's an interesting contemplation for me in watching
Yeah.
you and your journey, because it was certainly an interesting thing entering into your world and loving you for what you presented in the world, and also now watching you strip some of that away and being this super, like, I feel like I'm getting to see you go out into the world in the way that I saw you in private calls, which
Mm.
I I love and I admire, being so like willing to strip some of that away that was building a lot of your identity, that built an empire. And that's fucking
Yeah.
cool. That's awesome. And what I think women need to feel that sense of safety with other women.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I was sitting in the bathtub actually, like in the middle of all of the, the 30 days no makeup. And I'm like, God, this feels so stupid to be upset about giving makeup up. Like, this is really just like not a big issue in the world if we're comparing it to other like actual issues in the world, right? This is so vain. This is so ridiculous and silly. And I was like, gosh, there's so many women though that, I mean, I'm definitely guilty of playboyizing myself. There's so many women that objectify themselves and they anchor to the idea that their value is in how they look. Well, then what happens if you don't have your looks anymore? Are you just worthless? Like, what
Mhm.
happens with the words that you say and who you be and how you show up? And I just imagine the unconscious shackles that we don't even know that we're using perfectionism to mask with.
Yeah. Well, the reality is, I mean, the process you went through in that is one I think we go through as we grow and we
Mm-hmm.
willingly step into facing, looking at new parts of ourselves that always existed somewhere in the shadow, and we're there and ready
Mm.
when you're ready. And in that process, you have to grieve the part of yourself you had been presenting out in the world. And there's nothing, I think sometimes we can trivialize those things
Mm.
because there's such
Mm.
huge things going on in the rest of the world, and like there's a hurricane about to hit Florida, so why am I so upset that I can't wear makeup? But you're actually like allowing a part of you that has been a foremost identity to be stripped away. That is a big fucking deal. And we shouldn't
Mm-hmm.
trivialize it. Like,
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for that perspective.
like there should be no shame in the fact that like there is something hard about that. And it may not be makeup, right? Like it may be my bohemian flowy dresses. It may be like whatever piece it, for me, I mean, I went through the grieving process of the identity of me being a successful businesswoman being my identity, and
Mm.
that was hard, right? And everyone around me is like, yeah, of course we see all these other parts of you, but to me that was what made me.
That's what you led with, you felt
Yeah.
like.
Yeah.
Mm.
And it was hard. It was a hard process to shed it, and I'm so glad I did.
Yeah. I think it's safe to share this here because by the time this airs, Unmade, which is my retreat series that I have coming up in Atlanta here, it's called Unmade Rest in Success. One of the exercises I'm taking them through is to have everyone go around the room and introduce themselves. But the one thing you can't introduce yourself with or talk about is what you do, because I don't give a fuck. You're not what you do.
Yes.
Right. And we get to just like, who are you really?
Yeah.
Who are you when you let us see you? And so the unmade experience is about the unbecoming and really redefining success so we can be present with what is.
Yeah. I love it so much. And I'm so excited for you and the women that are going to be going through this experience because it's
Thank
so
you.
needed. And we've been told in this world that those identities and those labels are who we are. And it's kept us from actually connecting to the deeper part of ourselves that is who we are, who we truly are as, and I think like connected to our soul, like connected to
Mm,
the unique, very snowflake like part of us that doesn't exist in any other human being. So tell me
totally.
about the retreat in a way that you can without revealing too much, because I know you're going to have another one in March, and I hope there are people that follow me and listen to my stuff that would be super interested, because I think it just will align so well. So
Yeah.
what is the driving force behind the way you're building the retreat, and like what do you hope the transformation looks like for people?
Yeah, I hope it's the collective sigh for women when they arrive. They just say, "Ugh, I just needed this so much. I just needed a place to be held. I'm so used to holding everybody else. I'm so used to being the responsible one, and it's heavy." And that also we can explore how they can take their foot off the subconscious gas pedal that keeps them going, where anxiety is the driver, which is actually called trauma drive, versus love or intrinsic motivation, like who you be. My buddy Jeff Goins always says it's the book you can't not write. When you think about that, it's just the book that pours out of you. Like you almost become obsessed and like mission purpose driven because it's just in you, like alive, like this deep belly. You've felt this before. You're like, it's just there, and I just got to get it out on paper. No one needs to tell you to be motivated. You don't have to be accountable. Like it's just alive in you. And so if I can shift the way that they source their motivation, then they can be more connected to themselves rather than letting anxiety be the driver. Because the other side of that is the inability to simply be, to rest
Mm-hmm.
fully, to relax. And you've got to, if you've got a big mission, you've got to rest in order to take off. You cannot serve at this level and then the next doing what got you there,
Yeah.
likely.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's been my experience without a doubt. And I love that we're getting the opportunity to see more and more women find safe spaces to actually step into that, because I think it's in our intuitive nature to actually get to that place. It's like what we're
Mm,
actually longing for most of the time. I think it's what all humans are. And I think innately women have, because we operate from such an intuitive place, we have like this deep innate desire to get back to those roots of that. And when I say roots, I mean roots that we probably in this life have never actually had access to, but maybe our ancestors did sometime a long time
totally.
ago, you know?
It's also the thing I see women feeling deathly afraid of. They know that they're called, right? But it goes back to the grieving or the idea that you're giving up something that you think is actually you.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
answering that call is, I mean, this is my life's greatest work, walking through it, teaching it, but also it's been the scariest shit of my life. Like, you want me to give up makeup? Like, what? In fact, I put mascara on one of the days and like one of my eyes got infected. I was like, all right, got it. Like, seriously?
Thanks, universe. I got it. Thank you.
Yeah. So it was like, we can choose the path we're called to, but it doesn't mean the fear goes away because it's a
Mhm.
very real experience of feeling like you're giving up parts of yourself that you've relied on and sourced for so long. But what
Yeah.
a smart adaptation.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you witnessed me walk through that firsthand. So,
Totally.
I mean, in the
I
time frame
know.
that I signed on to work with you, and now, which is what, 6 or 7 months, I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
I went from like a thriving agency doing high six figures, likely on the path to $1 million a year, to like shutting the whole thing down to step into the work I really want to be doing.
Okay. And to be clear for listeners, because I'm like, I don't know if I want that as a testimonial.
Yeah. No,
she came to work with me.
Yeah.
And she gave it all up. It's like, hold on.
Wait. Well, I'll make some clarity on that. This was something that I knew in my core was what actually needed to happen.
You just told me this last week too. I was not part of the coaching where you arrived at giving up the agency.
By the time you were done, I was like well on my way to like make that its own business that was no longer owner operated.
Step away.
And be able to fully step away, which at that time was the right decision. And a series of things, like the mascara infecting your eye, but in a very different way, really showed me that I had found the work I am supposed to be doing. That I had the experience of taking 8 women on a retreat and
celebrating you for that. That is so cool.
Thank you. Yeah. And really being like, for the first time in my entire life, feeling so in my element, like truly beyond zone of excellence, the Gay Hendricks reference from The Big Leap, like beyond my zone of excellence, I was in my zone of genius. I was like just so there, like connected to source, serving these women in a non-ego way, but a fully like service-based way that changed their lives. Like the women that showed up there were not the women who left. And
my gosh, it's amazing.
It was transformative for them, but I think it was more transformative for me because even stepping into the process of like pulling the trigger of I'm doing this, I had canceled 2 retreats prior because of the exact thing you just talked about. The fear of, and one of the things I realized about 2 months before the retreat was the fear was, what happens if I fail at my soul's calling?
Oh, because you actually care about this so much.
So much. And it feels so like, I don't know if I believe in this or not, but it felt so like this is what I was contracted to put on this earth to do. Like this is my work, right? Like this is my life's work. Walking over the threshold means I'm actually going to be willing to see if that's true and I can be successful in the way that I think I'm going to be successful. But if I never step over that threshold, if I keep canceling retreats, I never have to know if I'm going to fail at it. Right? And, part of why I probably signed on with you was to hold me to the fire of like pushing all the way through and doing it. And, having the experience of actually serving those women and like all the visions I've had in the last 3 years of what that would look like didn't even equate to the experience. And so all of that together with a bunch of other tiny, eye infection mascara experiences made me be like, okay, like I can no longer hold this other thread. I can no longer hold on to this balloon line, even if I'm not the one that is making sure it's blown up. I'm ready to let it go. And, so that came after being held to the fire of actually walking over the threshold of the thing that I wanted to do that was so scary. So scary.
Remember when you put the deposit down?
I do. Yes. We can totally talk about that.
I was like, I think that might be fun to share. But I was like, so you put the deposit down and you're like, well, not yet. And I'm like, well, hold on a second. Like, let's call in, right? Because there were things that were happening in reality that were reflecting kind of the lack of going all in.
Yeah, totally. Absolutely. I mean, I'd actually love to hear now that we're over, like fully past, I'd love to hear your perspective on that situation because it was totally like a full sacral gut yes of like that I need to work with this woman. And I got so much out of it besides being held to the fire. Like, in all honesty, and I've told you this before, like I watching you coach made me be like, oh my gosh, I can do this. Like I'm already
Yeah, you can.
like I'm already embodying this. And I had like pedestaled you and being able to see myself in you. I mean, just the first day, the VIP day where I didn't even get to be in person, but on
You
Zoom.
were on the laptop in my house.
Yeah. And, you know, prior to that, though, I had had this full body sacral yes. And yet 48 hours later, I was like, oh, no. I can't do this. I can't do this.
Oh, I remember that
And
too.
I'd
I
love
was
to
like,
hear,
what is really going on here?
yeah, I'd love to hear the experience from your side of what you saw in that.
Well, and I think we see this with so many women where they feel the fuck yes, and then they
Mm-hmm.
question if they're right.
Yeah. We
Like, can I
question our
trust
intuitive
myself?
sense. Yeah.
Yeah, we question like, am I hearing this message right? Is my
Yeah.
body correct and leading me appropriately? Like,
Yeah.
even to your question around your soul's purpose, like, is this my soul's purpose? Like, and then if I do this, like, I could on some level be inherently broken if I can't even do my soul's purpose correctly, you
Yeah.
know? So, this massive
Totally.
fear of like, on my most deeply rooted, authentic self, even that potentially could be wrong or fail. And that feels really scary. So, I witnessed you have the fuck yes. And you arrive in clarity throughout our coaching container about other things, such as the retreat and where you wanted to do it and how you wanted to do
Mm-hmm.
it. And so
Mm-hmm.
I continued to ask clarifying questions around like, where else do you get to be more committed? Where else do we get to be all in? And that was like putting the deposit down, right? And I remember a specific moment, and we started out the coaching call, or it was like your time in the container because there were 3 other women in there. And you said, well, I was thinking maybe I should do the retreat with someone else, and maybe I'll partner with them, or maybe I'll run their retreats. And it was just, you were going into this doubt, right? Of maybe I'll do this and maybe I'll do that. So the thing about you, Jamie, is that we know you can do all the things. But I was like, I really wanted to hold you accountable to what you said you wanted to do, which was go all in on the one thing and not be everywhere, right? Not be kind of committed in several places. So I was obviously committed to your commitment, what you expressed. And that was like, well, if you're committed and you know this is the vision you've seen, whether or not you have women enrolled, you get to be enrolled first. And that looks like you putting the money down on the place.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally. And it was such an amazing experience to have someone walk with me in that way. Yeah, I mean, I can't explain it any other way except always feeling like I'm not pressured into choices. I'm coming from the place of like within myself, within my intuitive sense, within my body, within the deep knowing that I have. But we have been taught for so long that that is not true or not
Mm,
trustworthy. And so to have that space of someone actually helping me be in that and connected to it and
mm-hmm.
allowing me to have that, that made such a huge difference.
Yeah. And it was, for me, I knew when your words and your body matched what you were saying, that you authentically felt that. And so when I was listening to you, I was listening to all of you. And that included what I saw your body say to me. Because if I just saw your body say something different than what your words were saying, I might have coached a little bit differently. But that was not my
Right.
experience of you.
Right. Like, for instance, I think that that's a really interesting point and something to think about on the flip side, right? Is I actually had done a lot of work leading up to this point to be deeply connected to my body. So like I
Mm-hmm.
just wasn't trusting it yet.
Mm-hmm.
But on the flip side, we see a lot with people in general, women especially, where we've been taught to live in this like hyper masculine driven way, and we're like saying we want to do it in a certain way, and yet actually our bodies are like no. And so
Mm-hmm.
we are like overly committed to uh way of being, a framework, an execution, whatever, that has been taught to us. And something in our body is like, no, that's not what we should be doing. Hey, listen up, take a break, rest, like
Totally.
allow yourself to be in flow and intuition. And that's, I mean, as a witness, as a coach, it's a totally different experience. As someone in your body, it's a totally different experience. Like I view it as, when you are connected, it feels kind of like a groundedness and an expansion at the same time. Like you feel the sense of like growth and groundedness, but it's not in that like hyper excited way. It's in this like, my roots are deep way.
Yep.
But on the flip side, it feels very heady and exciting, and like you could just like spin off the earth a little bit.
Yeah. And I'll say, I think that's where most people like lose trust in their vision the most. Like that's the point that they start to question. And I'll give an example. Like, let's say you made a decision to coach only men. It wouldn't be surprising to me if then you out of nowhere started to have all these issues with the women that you coach that somehow left your container, broke contracts, stopped paying, whatever, because you made a decision, right? And that's where people start to lose their footing or their anchorage around the decision they've made, and they lose trust in it. They're like, oh no, I must have done something wrong, because if I'm doing something wrong, that's why these things are happening. And then what do we want to do is grab onto it, hold it a little bit longer, when in fact, the best thing to do is to stay rooted in the decision we've made, know that there's going to be a period of transition, chaos, and cleanup as those things leave our reality, so we can actually have what we want, and we let go. We got to let go, trust and let go. So it's in the staying rooted and in the trust that we see these things happen. It's kind of like, and I give the visual, like a tree in the middle of a tornado. So you see all the things swirling around you. The tree doesn't choose to join the tornado. You got to stay in the ground.
And that really, in my experience in working with you and working with other people, I had an ayahuasca journey right in the middle of working with you, which also like grounded me even deeper into this, and a sense of safety. Like it really comes from this somatic body safety place that is, I mean, really, we're just now getting into the science of it being more prevalent and actually talked about. And that's one of the things you're focused on. Like yes, the anxiety is the outward expression of it, but the way that you help people is through a deep somatic place.
Yeah. Thank you for saying that, because the anxiety is the external manifestation of the nervous system that is basically locked into a stuck trauma response.
Yeah.
It's you're in activation more often than not. Right? And so when you're not in the activation, it feels wrong. Like when you're resting, the question that these high performance women ask me who have high functioning anxiety, yeah, but like, what do I do when I'm relaxing? I said, but in asking what you do, you're missing the opportunity to be. Yeah. But like, what does that mean? So like, that means sleeping, right? It's like, I'm either on all cylinders fired, or I am doing postured rest, which looks like me scrolling, numbing out, watching TV, but nothing actually rejuvenating to my soul, or I'm sleeping. I'm off. So like, well, what does that look like in between? What is life-giving? What is childlike? What is playful? What is relaxing and restorative? And so exploring that and giving permission to rest, you know, and showing that that truly is such a wise investment, because without rest, you cannot pour from the empty cup. You just can't.
Yeah. That's something, you know, it's like a phrase we hear about a lot, but I think we don't actually understand what it really means, because the moment we step into rest, when we're in that high performance mode, the self-critical voice starts coming in of like, there's a better way to use your time.
And I've had women literally feel like they are wrong. Like they're like, I just feel like I'm going to get in trouble almost. Like this, the other shoe is going to drop.
Yeah,
energy.
totally. Yeah.
But you brought up something interesting before, which is like sometimes your body is saying no, but maybe your words are saying yes. So that's a place to explore as well somatically, because it could be that your nervous system and your body doesn't feel safe enough to
Mm-hmm.
align to the yes. Like you actually say you want these things, but you don't understand why you keep doing the same sabotaging behaviors. Self sabotage is really just self protection. And we've got 4 SPR, self protective responses, right? We've got fight, flight, fawn, or freeze. And those are just
Mm-hmm.
ways in which we learned to source our own internal safety, especially where emotions and experiences became too big for us to process at that current age. So
Mm-hmm.
sometimes our body says no and our words say yes. And it doesn't mean we don't want it, but it is something to get curious about to make sure that we can find and source our own safety within and expand what's called the window of tolerance.
Mm-hmm. Like we do cognitively have the desire, and we actually might even feel it like in our hearts.
Mm-hmm.
But because we haven't cultivated a deep sense of safety
Mm-hmm.
otherwise, that allows us to tap into walking over the threshold, if you will, of the fear and having the faith and having the trust of the unknown in that we will be okay. We're not going to die from this, which is like what that part of our brain is kind of telling ourselves that,
Totally.
yeah.
One way I'll coach around that is when someone's mouth is saying yes, but their body says no, it's still a no.
Mm.
Because that's the question I'll be asked there. Even when I taught intuitive eating, was, well, how do I know if it's my intuition or fear, like my egoic mind? And it's just like whatever feels true for you is your truth right now, and that gets to be okay, right? We
Yeah.
kind of get ourselves into some
Mm-hmm.
sticky grounds if we push clients beyond what they're actually feeling safe with within themselves. So we have to be mindful of that when someone's words and body don't match.
And that's part of the work, right? Is unshaming the no in that
Mm-hmm.
situation.
Mm-hmm.
And then also doing the deeper work, the rooted work of where that lack of safety is coming from, and both unshaming and healing that experience so that when the next time the question comes up, the answer may be different.
Oh, totally. I mean, I know that there have been times before I was trauma informed and studying, somatic experiencing, where there were decisions I definitely made probably at the top of my window of tolerance, like, or right outside the edges of that, where it felt like my truth, but it actually was a trauma response. It was
Yeah, me
actually just
too.
this, I was just overwhelmed. And I'm looking back, I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's what was really going on.
Yeah. What I love about this, and like I love Gay Hendricks and I love The Big Leap, and I think it's a really incredible book, especially in the early part of a journey in personal growth as an entrepreneur or anyone really, but stepping into like having that call. What I always felt like was missing in it, because he talks about the upper limit problem, which is kind of
Mm-hmm.
part of what we're talking
Yeah,
about, right?
totally.
And that gave explanation to sometimes when we like hit that ceiling and we bounce off, and then we're like, why can't I just get through this, or whatever that thing is. And the decisions that we are making subconsciously or consciously to keep us in our comfort zone, but that actually lacks that next level of trauma informed thought process that really shows, hey, there is something more and deeper. It's not just like, okay, now I know this is an upper limit and I'm just going to break through the ceiling, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
no, we actually can go deeper into seeing and accepting and integrating these parts of ourselves that are creating those upper limits so that we can move beyond in a really grounded, safe way versus like, I'm just
Mm-hmm.
going to punch through the ceiling.
Yeah, I love that you said accepted, and integrated, because often I think in a lot of the healing and personal development work, people are like, my ego's not my friend and I've got to get rid of this. And there's just this, you can kind of be playing in the mud with all the things that you're kind of focused on that are wrong or broken with you. And like everybody has shit. Like everybody has an upper level limit because you arrive there the minute you've never been there. So we all
Mm-hmm.
have those edges.
Yeah.
And I love the edges because they show me what's possible. Let's say I've reached something and I've rubber banded back. Wow, look what I'm capable of. That's so cool. And what part of me wants to be seen and befriended so that I'm not so scared the next time I'm at that edge again.
Yes.
It's not a place to feel wrong
Yeah.
and to, again, be upset at. It's a place to befriend that part of ourselves that's wanting to be acknowledged, seen, and held. That's why it
Yeah.
doesn't feel safe to
Witnessed.
begin with.
Yeah. The part of yourself that wants to be witnessed. I have been doing some learning from David Bederick. I'm in a course with him about unshaming. And that is what he talks about is that, and I think I have a personal opinion. I think you share it with me, at least close to it, that there's actually a huge part of the spiritual growth, the personal growth, healing industry that wants to hide away or heal or fix parts of ourselves. And that's really like, that is deeply based in shame versus no, these are parts of ourselves that have beauty and intelligence and incredible things to offer. And it really just needs to be witnessed and embraced and brought
Yeah.
into our whole because it hasn't had the chance to do that. And my experience with you, my experience in my biggest growth has been that work versus healing, fixing, changing parts of me that are holding me back, if you will.
Yeah. I mean, it's an interesting thing around the coupling of shame and these younger parts of ourselves that desire to be seen and acknowledged. If we make ourselves wrong for having them, we're really making ourselves wrong for trying to adapt to situations and emotions and feelings that felt overwhelming at the time. It's
Mm-hmm.
those places are crying out for love. And if
Mm-hmm.
we're going to fire those parts of ourselves that aren't ready to be let go of, I mean, we could actually cause a lot of trauma again,
Again,
re-traumatize
re-traumatizing.
ourselves,
Yeah.
right? Because that part of you is that developed as a result of not feeling safe. And so how wonderful and how wise of that younger part that was developed as a result of not feeling safe that you went and you were so resourceful and you adapted so wisely to create this part of you that learned how to cope with it.
Yes. Yeah.
And now imagine trying to fire that part of you or let go or make wrong. It's just
Mm-hmm.
going to perpetuate, again, even more separation within yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And really this is the work that changes everything, that allows you to actually think. And right now for me personally, it's theory, although I do get to be surrounded by amazing other humans that have brought themselves to incredible success this way versus kind of what has been represented to us out in the world for so long, in that is a very materialistic, hyper driven way. But this is actually a really deeply grounded mode to get to what is your success, what is deeply
Hmm.
aligned for you. And that may be millions of dollars in houses all over the world. That may also be the freedom to just have all the time in the world with your family,
Totally.
because we get to define success on within and in like a deeply intrinsic place and a grounded place that is from a sense of safety and not from what the external world is telling us.
Yeah, it will never be enough if it doesn't feel like enough right now, whatever those things
Mm-hmm.
are. because with you come your suitcases wherever you travel. And if it doesn't feel, again, like it's enough, you're going to chase the next thing.
Yeah.
And I've seen women that look like they have it all on paper and they are deeply unhappy and unfulfilled, and they can't figure out why, because what they learned was similar to what I learned or what I made things mean, which is if it looks good, well, then it will feel good. And if it doesn't, then something's wrong with me. But what if nothing's wrong with you?
That is a powerful question. And I think it's a really good one for people to contemplate. I'm a really big believer in contemplation versus having to have the answer. This is new for me in the last year. But like, it's the same thing as allowing yourself to be. Like, wow, that is a really interesting question. What might come up for me as I journal, or I wake up early in the morning, or do a little bit of breath work, and what crosses through my mind, or what crosses through my mind when I'm at a stop sign because I've allowed myself to just contemplate a really powerful question like that and allow what comes up and bubbles to the surface to be my truth right now.
Totally. And I'd love to offer the listeners a couple tangible things that they can do with this information.
I love that.
So I think that it's so awesome to have these conversations and dialogue. And oftentimes I find the question that people arrive at is like, okay, but now what? Like, what do I do with this information? So if you were to write down the cost of your actual dream life, like all the bells and whistles, what does it actually cost? Write it all down. Price it out. Add it up. Does it fall short? Does it exceed? Is it lower than you thought? You might be surprised.
Yeah.
So that's a really good tangible exercise to do. And then the other thing is, if you were living your dream life right now in this day, how does it look different than what you're doing right now, if at all?
I love those exercises. I know the first one was a huge eye opener for me because I didn't need as much as I thought I did. And that was really powerful because it was like, wow, we're actually not that far. And it felt like we were so far. And in the second one, man, for me, that brought so much gratitude because I realized, God, I have so much that I actually wanted or I think I want in my dream life. And, what you, in my view, like what you appreciate appreciates. And being able to see that and say, holy crap, like I've actually created more than my 5-year ago self thought I was going to.
Yeah.
And I'm living a life that I talked about wanting, but I think there was a part of me that never really knew if I could have it. And we moved the goalposts. Like we often as humans are so ready to find whatever the next place that we think we should be is and are not in deep appreciation for what we have created around us and have such a hard time. Like we're always looking at this horizon and always looking at how somehow the goalpost has moved another 20 yards down the field when like we've actually, come so far from where we've been and we've had hundreds of touchdowns that we didn't ever acknowledge or appreciate.
Yeah, for sure. Because I mean, at the end of the day, what's it all for, right? Like if living our dream life looks different than what we're doing right now, and let's say it includes, I just want to be present with my family, but your current day to day has you spending time with everything else other than your family, then what is all this even for? It's in complete opposition to what it is you say you actually want. So then something's got to change, right? Yeah. And then we wonder why we're tired, burned out, anxious all the time, and unhappy. And then we just take a really simple, good look at what is actually happening. And it's quite telling.
Yeah, because we're constantly, I know I did that. I remember my husband we lived 4 blocks from the ski lift in Breckenridge. And I owned my own company. I mean, I still do. I'm pretty much unemployable, I'm pretty sure. But I had every ability and choice to go skiing in the middle of the week whenever the fuck I wanted to. And I never did it. And he would come home on powder days and be like, hello, like, you have sat on this couch for 8 hours. Doing what?
Mm-hmm.
And I, in my mind, was making it like I didn't have a choice. And that none of that was true. None of it was true. I missed a lot of powder days because of stories I was telling myself that I had to do that were absolutely not true. And I'm living a life today that shows me that.
Yep, totally.
Because I was willing to actually take a look at the stories and bullshit that I was creating. And the influence of the stories that culturally, society, whatever, family told me that that's how it had to be. And it really didn't.
Totally. Yeah. And I'll remind myself or clients, like, who's in charge of your day and how you spend it? And it's like, oh, yeah, I
Yeah.
am.
And we need reminders. We do need
Yeah.
reminders about that for sure. Oh my gosh, Keri, this has been such a beautiful conversation. It just fills my soul. I am so happy to have you here. And I am just so deeply excited for you and the impact you're going to make in this place that you're at. It feels so grounded and so impactful, and just like you're really stepping into the greatest version of yourself that has existed, which you have done several times. But this one feels to me, in the short time I've known you, as like you're allowing your golden thread to like create this beautiful
Yeah, for
tapestry.
sure. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for seeing that. I really did not want it to be anxiety, but I couldn't unsee it once I saw it because it's so interesting. I mean, the conflicting thought was, if it's anxiety, then admitting you have anxiety also feels like it's admitting you don't have your shit together. And I used to pride myself on being postured like I had everything together. And it's so interesting that this is the thing. So I was like, yeah, that means it's right.
Yeah. That deep feeling of like, oh, this is not what I want it to be. I mean, I'm not going
This
to go too
doesn't
deep into
sound
it,
very
but
exciting, but like people, me, 5, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, needed this work.
yeah, it's so true. I mean, it is such a huge driving force of so many high performers in general. And I think women even more so than men. That's a personal opinion. I know men with deep anxiety, sure. But
Yeah.
I think that the weight that we carry, personally, the weight we carry from the maternal instinct, the weight we carry from, I think, generations back of women who,
Oh yeah.
like that we are carrying in our DNA, epigenetics wise, and all of the other pieces. The anxiety that we have to be a certain way is deep, and it's really needed work. So thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
If somebody is interested in learning more about Unmade or the other opportunities that you might have to work with you, where can they go?
Yeah, the best place to find me is on elevatewithkeri, KERI.com. Everything's there. Instagram links, programs, all the things.
Amazing. And there are definitely opportunities beyond the retreat to be in Keri's world, from the free aspect of following her on Instagram, and she has a lot of amazing value and content that's there, to her meditations and membership that she offers that are incredible. But if you are called, I highly recommend, having had personal experience, that you explore working with Keri and her brilliance in this aspect, it is incredible and beautiful and so needed. So thank you so much for being here with me, having this incredible conversation that I'm sure so many people are going to benefit from. And I'm sure it won't be the last time you join me.
No, not at all. Thanks for having me. It does not, it's not lost on me how much of a gift it is to be featured on clients' podcasts, because you can choose so many different people to have on here. And I'm just celebrating you big on the launch of this podcast and all the other things that you're doing.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And anything that we talked about will be on the show notes today, and we'll make sure that links and connections are all there. So follow along. And if you haven't already, go ahead and subscribe to the podcast, subscribe to the YouTube channel, and continue to share with the world all of this beautiful knowledge so that more people can come into their greatness.
I am Jamie O'Connor, and you are listening to the Inspired Focus podcast. If you haven't already, head over to Instagram and give us a follow at Inspired Focus Podcast. You can also subscribe to your favorite platform by checking us out at inspiredfocuspodcast.com. If you're interested in learning more about how you can work with me or getting information about the next retreat, which is Flourish Baja, you can get that information at inspiredfocus.co. We will be living it up in Mexico from May 21st to May 26th, and I would love for you to join me. Check that out at inspiredfocus.co. See you soon.